The silence stretched across the Tactical Operations Center like a held breath. 27 minutes had passed since SEAL Team Delta's last transmission, and the green dots on the digital map hadn't moved an inch. Major Rebecca, Valkyrie, Thorne watched the screens with the kind of stillness that made junior officers uncomfortable. Her call sign wasn't chosen for her Nordic heritage or Hollywood fantasies. It came from a reputation for guiding the dead home. At Bagram Air Base, Afghanistan, the morning briefing had started like any other. Intelligence suggested a high-value target in the Kunar Valley, a Taliban commander responsible for IED networks that had claimed 47 American lives in 6 weeks. Standard extraction mission. 8 SEALs, in and out before sunrise. But Afghanistan had a way of turning routine into nightmare, and this October morning would prove no different. The first sign of trouble came at 3:47 hours. Staff Sergeant Martinez's voice crackled through the radio, professional but strained. "Overwatch, we've got movement. Lots of movement. Request immediate air support." Then nothing. The kind of nothing that makes seasoned operators reach for their sidearms even in the safety of the TOC. Colonel James Harrison, a Vietnam veteran whose gray mustache had witnessed 3 decades of American conflicts, studied the satellite feed with growing concern. The SEAL's position sat in a valley surrounded by ridgelines, perfect for an ambush, terrible for escape. Thermal imaging showed at least 60 hostiles converging on their location, moving with the coordinated precision of trained fighters rather than opportunistic insurgents. "Sir, we need close air support now," urged Captain Williams, the mission coordinator whose sweaty palms left marks on his tablet screen. "Those boys are sitting ducks." Harrison's weathered fingers drummed against the metal table. 2 F-16s were 40 minutes out, too far for immediate response. The Apache helicopter was grounded with mechanical issues. Predator drones carried Hellfire missiles, but friendly forces were danger close, making precision strikes impossible without risking American lives. That's when Thorne spoke up from her position near the communications array. "Sir, I can be wheels up in 3 minutes." Her voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who had danced with death and learned its rhythm. At 29, she was one of only 14 female A-10 pilots in the Air Force, flying the unglamorous but devastating close air support aircraft that grunts called the most beautiful sound in the world. Harrison's eyes narrowed. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, affectionately known as the Warthog, was built around a massive 30mm cannon designed to destroy Soviet tanks. It flew low, slow, and ugly, perfect for danger-close missions but vulnerable to ground fire. What he was considering violated every tactical manual ever written, but sometimes war demanded impossible choices. The last transmission from the SEALs had been desperate. "We're surrounded. Send everything you've got." In the pre-dawn darkness of Afghanistan, everything they had was Valkyrie. The weight of 8 American lives pressed against the silence as Harrison made his decision. Outside, the twin engines of Thorne's A-10 were already spinning up, their distinctive whine cutting through the mountain air like a promise. She had been preparing for this moment her entire career, though she couldn't have known it would come disguised as a routine Tuesday morning in October. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency across the pre-flight checklist, each switch and button a familiar friend in the cockpit that had become her second home. The A-10's titanium bathtub could withstand significant ground fire, but what she was about to attempt would test every design specification Fairchild Republic had ever imagined. The valley where Delta Team waited was a natural amphitheater of death, surrounded by ridgelines that offered perfect firing positions for enemy forces. "Valkyrie, this is Overwatch." Harrison's voice came through her headset with unwavering authority. "You are cleared for immediate takeoff. Friendlies are at grid reference November 742 Echo. Approximately 60 hostiles in defensive positions along the ridgelines. Rules of engagement are weapons-free, but watch your fire. Our boys are trapped in the valley floor with zero cover." The irony wasn't lost on her. 3 years earlier, Male pilots had whispered behind her back about women lacking the physical strength for combat aircraft, their voices carrying the particular breed of condescension reserved for outsiders in warrior culture. They questioned her G-force tolerance, her decision-making under pressure, her ability to handle the Warthog's brutal recoil when the GAU-8 cannon unleashed its fury. Tonight, their opinions meant nothing. 8 SEALs needed salvation, and she was their only option. As her aircraft lifted into the pre-dawn sky, Thorne's mind shifted into the zone she had cultivated through hundreds of training missions. The A-10 climbed steadily, its twin General Electric engines pushing her toward a rendezvous with destiny. Below, the Afghan landscape stretched out in familiar patterns of brown and tan, dotted with compounds and villages that had witnessed 40 years of continuous warfare. Her radio crackled with an update from the TOC. Valkyrie, latest intelligence shows hostiles have established interlocking fields of fire. They're using RPGs and small arms, possibly some crew-served weapons. Your friendlies are pinned down in a dried riverbed with minimal cover. Time is critical. They won't last long in their current position. Thorne acknowledged the transmission with professional brevity, but inside, her heart rate increased slightly. This wasn't a training exercise where mistakes resulted in debriefing sessions and red ink on evaluation forms. 8 families would either welcome their warriors home or receive folded flags and condolence letters. The weight of that responsibility settled across her shoulders like a familiar coat. The stars above Afghanistan were beginning to fade as dawn approached, creating the perfect tactical window for her mission. Banking her aircraft toward the Kunar Valley, Thorne began her descent into what would become either her greatest triumph or final mission. The A-10's heads-up display painted a clinical picture of the battlefield below, but she knew reality would be far messier than any computer simulation. In minutes, she would drop below radar coverage and enter a cauldron of enemy fire, guided only by skill, instinct, and the desperate voices of trapped Americans calling for salvation. The radio remained eerily quiet as she approached the target area. No friendly transmissions, no status updates, no confirmation that the SEALs were even alive to receive her assistance. In the distance, the sun prepared to paint the Hindu Kush mountains in shades of gold and crimson, a beautiful backdrop for what promised to be an ugly morning. Thorne's grip tightened on the stick as she prepared to dive into hell itself. Below radar meant flying at altitudes where enemy small arms could reach her aircraft, where rocket-propelled grenades became viable threats, where a single lucky shot could end both her mission and her life. But it also meant invisibility from sophisticated air defense systems, the element of surprise that might tip the scales in favor of American forces trapped in the valley below. Her targeting system began acquiring potential threats along the ridgelines, painting hostile positions with electronic precision. Soon, the GAU-8 cannon would speak with its distinctive buzzsaw voice, dispensing justice at 3,900 rounds per minute. The morning was about to become very loud indeed. At exactly 4:12 hours, Major Rebecca Thorne pushed her A-10 Thunderbolt II into a screaming dive toward the Kunar Valley, where 8 Americans waited for a miracle delivered on wings of titanium and fury. The world exploded in a symphony of violence as Thorne's aircraft descended through 500 feet, then 300, pushing the tactical envelope beyond any reasonable limit. Her altimeter showed readings that would make safety instructors weep, but conventional tactics had already failed the trapped SEALs. Through her canopy, muzzle flashes flickered along the ridgelines like deadly fireflies, confirming intelligence reports about enemy positions. "Any station, this is Havoc 6, a voice suddenly burst through radio static, barely recognizable through exhaustion and stress. Staff Sergeant Martinez, Delta Team's communications specialist, was alive but clearly desperate. "We've got wounded and are taking effective fire from 3 directions. Cannot move from current position. Request immediate assistance, over." Thorne's response came in the calm, measured tones that separated professional aviators from adrenaline junkies. Havoc 6, this is Valkyrie inbound your position. Maintain your heads down and mark your location with infrared strobe. I'm coming in hot. The A-10's targeting system painted a complex picture of the battlefield. Thermal imaging revealed at least 47 individual heat signatures positioned along the valley's rim, their weapons trained on the dried riverbed where Delta Team had taken whatever cover they could find. These weren't untrained insurgents firing wildly into the darkness. Their positioning showed tactical sophistication and careful coordination. Banking hard left, Thorne aligned her aircraft with the eastern ridgeline, where the heaviest concentration of enemy fighters had established firing positions. The GAU-8 cannon, mounted in the A-10's nose like the angry eye of some mechanical god, began its deadly calculation. At this altitude, every shot had to count. There would be no second chances, no opportunity to circle back for additional passes if she miscalculated the first attack run. Her finger found the trigger as crosshairs settled on the largest cluster of hostile thermal signatures. The cannon's voice was distinctive, not the sharp crack of rifle fire or the deep boom of artillery, but a sustained buzzing roar that seemed to tear reality itself. 30mm depleted uranium rounds streamed earthward at incredible velocity, each projectile capable of penetrating tank armor, let alone human flesh, and the rocky terrain where Taliban fighters had thought themselves safe. The effect was immediate and devastating. Thermal signatures along the ridgeline flickered and disappeared as the cannon's fury swept across enemy positions. Secondary explosions suggested ammunition stockpiles or weapons caches, adding chaos to the carefully orchestrated ambush that had trapped Delta Team. But victory celebrations were premature. As Thorne pulled out of her attack dive, tracer rounds began reaching toward her aircraft like angry red fingers. The enemy was returning fire with everything they had, and some of those rounds were finding their mark against her titanium armor. "Valkyrie, you've got multiple hostiles engaging you with small arms," Martinez reported, his voice carrying both gratitude and concern. "Your pass was effective, but they're adjusting fire toward your aircraft." Banking into a climbing left turn, Thorne assessed battle damage through instrument readings and the distinctive sounds her aircraft made. One engine showed slightly elevated temperatures, suggesting possible damage from ground fire, but both turbines continued providing thrust. The A-10 had been designed to absorb punishment and continue fighting, a philosophy that was about to be thoroughly tested. Her second attack run targeted the northern ridgeline, where muzzle flashes indicated at least 15 fighters had maintained their positions despite witnessing the devastation of their comrades. This time, rocket-propelled grenades streaked toward her aircraft as she dove toward the target area, their smoky trails creating deadly geometric patterns against the dawn sky. One RPG passed close enough to her port wing that she could see the warhead's distinctive shape through her peripheral vision. Too close for comfort, but not close enough to end her mission. The morning sun was beginning to illuminate the valley floor, revealing the true scope of Delta Team's predicament for the first time. Golden light streaming across the Hindu Kush revealed a scene from tactical hell. 8 SEALs lay scattered across a dried riverbed barely 50 meters wide, their digital camouflage offering minimal concealment against the tan soil. 2 figures remained motionless. Whether dead or seriously wounded was impossible to determine from Thorne's altitude. The remaining 6 had constructed fighting positions using rocks and debris, but their cover wouldn't survive sustained enemy fire much longer. Martinez's voice carried increasing urgency. "Valkyrie, we've got 2 urgent surgical cases and ammunition running low. Enemy forces are massing for what looks like a ground assault. We need extraction or significant reinforcement within the next 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Thorne's fuel calculations showed she could maintain station for perhaps 15 minutes of combat operations before requiring return to base. The math was unforgiving. Either she broke this ambush quickly, or Delta Team would face overwhelming numbers with depleted ammunition and no air support. Her third attack run focused on the western approach, where thermal imaging detected approximately 20 hostiles moving down the hillside in what appeared to be assault formations. These weren't defensive positions anymore. The enemy had decided to finish Delta Team with direct action rather than prolonged siege warfare. The GAU-8 cannon spoke again, its rounds chewing through rocky soil and human targets with equal indifference. At this range, each trigger pull released approximately 60 rounds in concentrated bursts, creating devastation that no infantry formation could survive intact. Bodies tumbled down the hillside as the assault dissolved under withering fire from above. But ammunition wasn't infinite, and fuel consumption at combat power settings was bleeding her reserves faster than anticipated. Warning lights began illuminating on her instrument panel, not critical yet, but approaching decision points that every pilot dreaded. "Overwatch, this is Valkyrie," she transmitted to the TOC while climbing for another attack run. "I've significantly degraded enemy strength on 3 approaches, but they still maintain positions on the southern ridgeline. My fuel state is approaching bingo levels. Request status on additional air support." Colonel Harrison's response carried frustration that even professional military courtesy couldn't entirely mask. "Valkyrie, nearest additional assets are still 30 minutes out. You're all they've got. Can you maintain station?" The question hung in the air like smoke from burning vehicles. Maintaining station meant potentially running out of fuel before reaching friendly territory, but departing meant abandoning 8 Americans to certain death. Mathematics versus moral obligation, tactical doctrine versus human loyalty, the eternal calculus of military aviation distilled into a single moment of decision. Below, Delta Team continued their desperate fight for survival, unaware that their salvation hung in the balance of fuel gauges and ammunition counters. Martinez had stopped providing regular updates, suggesting either communication difficulties or casualties among the team's leadership. The silence from the valley floor spoke volumes about their deteriorating situation. Thorne made her choice with characteristic brevity. "Overwatch, Valkyrie copies, remaining on station until mission completion." Her fourth attack run would target the final concentration of enemy fighters, but fuel warnings were becoming increasingly insistent. The A-10's twin engines consumed aviation fuel at prodigious rates during combat operations, and she was rapidly approaching the point where return to base would require flying on fumes. The southern ridgeline held the key to Delta Team's survival, and time was running out. Diving toward the final enemy stronghold, Thorne's mind calculated angles, ammunition expenditure, and fuel consumption with the precision of a human computer. The southern ridgeline contained the most sophisticated enemy positions, including what appeared to be a recoilless rifle or heavy machine gun capable of engaging both ground targets and her aircraft. Intelligence reports had mentioned the possibility of shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles in the area, but visual confirmation remained elusive. Her targeting system locked onto the largest thermal signature, likely a crew-served weapon that posed the greatest threat to Delta Team's survival. The GAU-8 cannon had approximately 400 rounds remaining, enough for perhaps 2 more sustained bursts before requiring careful ammunition management. Each trigger pull had to achieve maximum effect with minimal waste. The first burst found its mark with devastating accuracy. The suspected heavy weapons position erupted in secondary explosions, ammunition cooking off in brilliant flashes that illuminated the entire ridgeline. Shrapnel from destroyed weapons added to the chaos, creating casualty effects well beyond the cannon's direct impact area. But the enemy wasn't finished. As Thorne pulled out of her attack dive, a surface-to-air missile streaked upward from a previously undetected position, its infrared seeker head tracking her aircraft's heat signature with deadly precision. The SA-7 Grail, a Soviet-era weapon common throughout Afghanistan, had a relatively short range but lethal warhead capable of downing even robust aircraft like the A-10. Thorne's reaction was instantaneous and instinctive: flare deployment, radical evasive maneuvering, and prayers to whatever deity protected aviators in combat. The missile passed behind her starboard engine, its proximity fuse detonating close enough to pepper her aircraft with shrapnel, but not close enough to achieve catastrophic damage. Her instruments showed Engine 2 operating at reduced efficiency, oil pressure fluctuating in patterns that suggested significant damage. The A-10 could fly on one engine, but performance would be severely degraded, especially at the low altitudes required for effective ground attack missions. Havoc 6, this is Valkyrie, she transmitted while assessing battle damage and fuel state. I've neutralized the southern positions, but my aircraft has sustained damage. What's your current status? Martinez's response brought the first good news of the morning. Valkyrie, enemy fire has significantly decreased. We're seeing survivors withdrawing from the ridgelines. You've broken their assault, but we still need extraction. Our 2 wounded need immediate medical attention. The sound of rotor blades echoing through the valley provided the answer to their prayers. A medevac helicopter, call sign Dustov 72, had been monitoring their frequencies and was inbound to the valley floor despite the ongoing tactical situation. Combat search and rescue missions were among the most dangerous operations in military aviation, but helicopter crews had never been accused of lacking courage. Thorne provided overwatch as the HH-60 Black Hawk descended into the valley, her remaining ammunition ready to suppress any surviving enemy positions that might threaten the extraction. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust and debris, its crew chief and medics immediately rushing toward Delta Team's position with stretchers and medical equipment. Loading wounded SEALs under potential enemy fire was a delicate operation requiring precise coordination between ground and air assets. Thorne maintained a tight orbit around the landing zone, her damaged engines protesting the continued high-power settings, but still providing the thrust needed for combat operations. The extraction proceeded with military efficiency born of extensive training and desperate necessity. Within 4 minutes, all 8 SEALs were aboard the medevac helicopter, which immediately departed for the combat support hospital at Bagram Air Base. 2 lives hung in the balance, but they were alive and receiving medical care, a significantly better outcome than anyone had dared hope 30 minutes earlier. As the last American helicopter disappeared over the eastern mountains, Thorne was finally alone in Afghan airspace, nursing a damaged aircraft toward home base with fuel gauges showing uncomfortably low readings. The flight back to Bagram tested every hour of Thorne's training and experience, as fuel consumption calculations became increasingly critical. Engine 2 continued operating at reduced power, forcing her to manage thrust settings with mathematical precision. The A-10's fuel capacity provided generous margins during normal operations, but combat power settings and battle damage had transformed her situation into a careful balance between altitude, airspeed, and fuel conservation. Her radio crackled with updates from the Tactical Operations Center, where Colonel Harrison monitored her progress with the intensity of a man whose career depended on bringing his pilots home alive. Valkyrie, Bagram Tower has emergency equipment standing by. Medical personnel are prepared for crew injuries. What's your current fuel state? Overwatch, Valkyrie shows 800 pounds remaining with approximately 12 minutes to base, she replied, her voice maintaining professional composure despite growing concern about her aircraft's condition. The numbers weren't catastrophic yet, but they allowed no margin for error or additional complications. Afghanistan's unforgiving terrain stretched beneath her damaged aircraft. Mountains, valleys, and desert expanses where forced landings meant capture or death. The Taliban had demonstrated particular creativity in their treatment of downed American aircrews, providing additional motivation for reaching friendly territory regardless of mechanical difficulties. Her damaged engine began showing more serious symptoms as she crossed the final mountain range before Bagram. Oil pressure fluctuated wildly, temperatures climbed toward redline values, and unusual vibrations transmitted through the airframe suggested internal damage that could lead to catastrophic failure without warning. The A-10's reputation for survivability was about to receive another field test. Bagram Tower, this is Valkyrie declaring emergency, she transmitted as the airbase came into view on the horizon. I have battle damage to Engine 2, low fuel state, and am requesting straighten approach to runway 27. Emergency equipment requested on the field. The tower controller's response was immediate and professional. Valkyrie, Bagram Tower copies your emergency. You are cleared straighten approach runway 27. Wind calm, emergency equipment is rolling. Fire and rescue standing by. Landing a damaged aircraft on minimum fuel required the kind of precision that separated experienced combat pilots from weekend aviators. Too fast meant consuming precious fuel during extended approach patterns. Too slow risked stalling an aircraft already operating at the margins of its performance envelope. Her approach had to be perfect on the first attempt. There wouldn't be sufficient fuel for a second try. The runway threshold passed beneath her landing gear as Engine 2 finally surrendered to battle damage, compressor stalls creating violent shuddering throughout the airframe. But the A-10's single-engine landing characteristics were benign, and her touchdown was smooth despite the dramatic circumstances. Fire trucks and medical personnel swarmed her aircraft as it rolled to a stop, their crews trained to deal with battle-damaged aircraft and potentially injured pilots. But Thorne climbed down from her cockpit under her own power, her legs slightly unsteady from adrenaline fatigue, but otherwise unharmed. Colonel Harrison was waiting for her on the flight line, his weathered face showing the strain of the morning's operations. Behind him stood the junior officers who had witnessed her departure 3 hours earlier, their expressions notably different from the subtle skepticism she had grown accustomed to throughout her military career. "Outstanding work, Major," Harrison said, his handshake firm and respectful. "Delta team is at the hospital. Both wounded are expected to make full recoveries. You saved 8 American lives this morning." The words carried weight beyond their simple meaning: recognition, respect, and acceptance into the brotherhood of warriors who had proven themselves in combat. Recovery operations revealed the extent of damage her A-10 had sustained during the mission. 17 bullet holes peppered the fuselage and wings, testament to the accuracy of enemy ground fire and the effectiveness of the aircraft's armor protection. Engine 2 required complete replacement, its internal components destroyed by shrapnel from the surface-to-air missiles near miss. In any other aircraft, such damage would likely have proven fatal. News of the mission spread quickly through military channels, carried by the efficient gossip network that connected forward operating bases throughout Afghanistan. The story grew slightly with each retelling, but the essential facts remained consistent. A female A-10 pilot had single-handedly broken up a coordinated Taliban ambush, saved 8 American lives, and brought her battle-damaged aircraft home despite mechanical failures and fuel exhaustion. Within 48 hours, requests for interviews began arriving from military publications, news organizations, and documentary filmmakers eager to chronicle her heroic actions. The attention was flattering but unwelcome. Thorne had joined the military to serve her country, not to become a media celebrity or poster child for women in combat aviation. Her squadron mates' attitudes underwent a subtle but significant transformation. The casual skepticism and condescending comments that had characterized her early career disappeared, replaced by genuine respect from pilots who understood the skill required to accomplish her mission. Combat had a way of clarifying perspectives, stripping away preconceptions to reveal fundamental truths about courage, competence, and character. Staff Sergeant Martinez sent a handwritten letter from his hospital bed, expressing gratitude that no amount of official commendations could match. His words were simple but profound. "Major Thorne, you brought us home when nobody else could. Delta Team owes you everything. Semper Fi." The Marines' tribute to an Air Force pilot represented the kind of inter-service respect that transcended branch rivalries and bureaucratic boundaries. The rescued SEALs recovered quickly from their physical wounds, but several struggled with survivor's guilt, the psychological burden of living, while friends might have died without extraordinary intervention. Military psychologists worked with the team to process their experiences, emphasizing the randomness of combat survival and the importance of learning from close calls rather than dwelling on hypothetical alternatives. 3 weeks later, Thorne was back in the cockpit of a newly assigned, leading training missions for junior pilots who hung on her every word with the attention reserved for certified combat veterans. Her call sign, Valkyrie, had evolved from a nickname into a legend, whispered with reverence in ready rooms and officer clubs throughout the theater of operations. But for Thorne, the greatest satisfaction came not from recognition or awards, but from the knowledge that 8 American families had been spared the devastating phone call that military wives and mothers feared above all else. Their husbands and sons would return home because she had chosen duty over safety, mission accomplishment over personal survival. In the pre-dawn darkness of Afghanistan, ordinary people were sometimes called upon to perform extraordinary acts. On one particular October morning, Major Rebecca Thorne had answered that call with skill, courage, and determination that would be remembered long after the war itself faded into history. The mission had ended, but the legend was just beginning. Military awards and decorations followed with bureaucratic inevitability: the Distinguished Flying Cross, Air Medal with Valor, and Purple Heart for minor injuries sustained during the mission. Each ribbon and medal represented official recognition of her actions, but they felt somehow inadequate to capture the complexity of those desperate minutes over the Kunar Valley. Combat defied easy categorization, existing in a realm where split-second decisions carried life-or-death consequences that no amount of training could fully prepare one to face. During the awards ceremony at Bagram Air Base, General Patricia Morrison, the first female 3-star general in Air Force history, pinned the decorations to Thorne's dress blue uniform while cameras recorded the moment for posterity. The general's presence carried symbolic weight beyond the ceremony itself, a visible reminder that barriers were falling throughout the military, sometimes one dangerous mission at a time. "Major Thorne," General Morrison said during her remarks, "your actions represent the finest traditions of American military aviation. You demonstrated that courage, skill, and dedication to fellow service members transcend any artificial barriers that small minds might attempt to construct. The 8 men whose lives you saved will carry your story to their children and grandchildren, ensuring that future generations understand what it means to serve with honor." The words were carefully chosen for their political and historical significance, but they resonated with deeper truths about military service and the bonds forged between warriors in combat. Thorne had proven herself not as a female pilot, but simply as a pilot, competent, brave, and committed to the mission above all personal considerations. Letters arrived from families of the rescued SEALs, expressing gratitude in terms that sometimes brought tears to her eyes. Martinez's wife wrote, "Major Thorne, I don't know how to thank you for bringing my husband home. Our 3 children still have their father because of your courage. You will always be part of our family." Similar sentiments arrived from 7 other families whose lives had been forever changed by events in a remote Afghan valley. The psychological impact of such responsibility weighed heavily on Thorne during quiet moments, when adrenaline faded and reflection took its place. She had held 8 lives in her hands during those crucial minutes, making decisions that would affect not just the immediate participants but their families, communities, and future generations. The weight of that responsibility was both humbling and empowering, proof that individual actions could indeed make profound differences in an often chaotic world. Her story began appearing in military journals and aviation magazines, typically accompanied by dramatic photographs of her battle-damaged and carefully crafted narratives that emphasized both her technical competence and personal courage. The coverage was generally positive, but she remained uncomfortable with the attention, preferring the anonymous professionalism that had characterized her career before that October morning made her famous. Young women considering military careers began reaching out through official channels, seeking advice and inspiration from someone who had broken barriers while accomplishing the mission. Thorne tried to respond thoughtfully to each inquiry, emphasizing that success in military aviation required the same qualities regardless of gender: dedication, skill, physical courage, and commitment to something larger than personal ambition. The Taliban, meanwhile, learned their own lessons from the failed ambush. Intelligence reports suggested significant changes in their tactics, including improved air defense measures and modified techniques for engaging American forces. The enemy adapted quickly to battlefield realities, ensuring that future operations would require constant innovation and tactical evolution. War was ultimately a learning contest between adversaries, with survival favoring those who adapted most effectively to changing conditions. 6 months after the rescue mission, Thorne received orders transferring her to the Air Force Weapons School at Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada, the institution responsible for training the military's most elite tactical aviators. Her combat experience and proven ability under pressure had earned her selection for advanced training that would prepare her to develop tactics and train future generations of close air support pilots. The assignment represented both recognition and opportunity, but it also meant leaving the combat zone where she had found her professional identity and purpose. The transition from combat operations to advanced tactical training presented unexpected challenges for someone whose recent experience had been measured in life-and-death decisions rather than academic exercises. Nellis Air Force Base, located in the Nevada desert outside Las Vegas, served as the military's premier center for weapons and tactics development, where America's most experienced combat pilots learned to become instructors and innovators. Thorne's new role as a weapons school instructor required her to distill hard-won combat experience into teachable concepts that could be transmitted to younger aviators who had never faced enemy fire. The transition from practitioner to teacher demanded different skills: the ability to communicate complex tactical concepts, analyze battlefield scenarios objectively, and develop training scenarios that prepared students for the reality of combat without the luxury of actual experience. Her first class included 12 experienced pilots from various air forces, including 2 international students from allied nations. Their backgrounds ranged from air-to-air specialists transitioning to ground attack roles to experienced close air support pilots seeking advanced certification. Each brought unique perspectives and challenges, but all shared the common goal of mastering their profession at the highest levels. "The mission we're going to discuss today took place in the Kunar Valley," she began during her first lecture, projecting satellite imagery of the terrain where Delta Team had been trapped. 8 American Special Operations personnel were surrounded by approximately 60 enemy fighters in defensive positions along commanding terrain. Weather conditions were clear, visibility unlimited, and friendly forces were in immediate danger of being overrun. The students listened with intense attention, aware that their instructor was describing her own combat mission rather than a theoretical scenario from training manuals. Combat veterans possessed a credibility that no amount of academic study could provide, and her words carried the weight of personal experience rather than textbook theory. "The key lesson here isn't about individual heroics or dramatic single-pilot missions," she continued, advancing to tactical diagrams that illustrated enemy positions and attack vectors. It's about systematic problem-solving under extreme time pressure. Every combat situation presents multiple variables that must be evaluated and prioritized within seconds rather than minutes. Today, we're going to break down the decision-making process that led to mission success. Her teaching methodology emphasized analytical thinking over emotional responses, encouraging students to examine combat scenarios with a detached professionalism that separated effective tactical aviators from adrenaline junkies who relied more on luck than skill. Combat aviation demanded the ability to make rational decisions while experiencing fear, fatigue, and tremendous responsibility for other people's lives. The weapons school curriculum included both classroom instruction and intensive flight training, with students logging hundreds of hours in simulated combat scenarios designed to test their tactical knowledge under realistic stress conditions. Thorne's reputation as a combat veteran added weight to her critiques and recommendations, but she was careful to emphasize that successful tactics required adaptation to specific circumstances rather than blind adherence to predetermined formulas. Her personal story continued evolving as military historians and journalists sought to document the broader significance of her mission within the context of women's expanding roles in combat aviation. She participated selectively in such projects, always emphasizing that her actions represented professional competence rather than gender-based achievements. The distinction mattered to her, even if others preferred more dramatic narratives. Evening hours at Nellie's provided opportunities for reflection that had been impossible during the operational tempo of combat deployments. The Nevada desert offered stark beauty and profound silence that contrasted sharply with the chaos and violence she had experienced in Afghanistan. These quiet moments allowed her to process experiences that had occurred too quickly for real-time analysis. Letters from the rescued SEALs continued arriving periodically, updating her on their recoveries, career progressions, and family developments. Martinez had been promoted to gunnery sergeant and was training new special operations personnel, passing along lessons learned during his own close call with death. His children had grown older, reaching milestones they might never have experienced without her intervention that October morning. Such correspondence served as powerful reminders of the human dimension underlying military operations that were often reduced to statistics and tactical lessons. The transformation in how colleagues and peers viewed her abilities had been gradual but unmistakable. Where skepticism and subtle condescension had once existed, she now found professional respect and genuine collegiality. Combat had a way of clarifying relationships, stripping away superficial prejudices to reveal fundamental truths about competence and character. Her call sign, Valkyrie, was spoken with reverence rather than irony, representing hard-earned credibility within the tight-knit community of military aviators. During advanced tactical exercises at Nellie's, she found herself serving as an evaluator and mentor for pilots seeking to master the most challenging aspects of their profession. The role reversal was significant. Instead of proving herself to skeptical peers, she was now responsible for evaluating their readiness for combat operations. Her standards were demanding but fair, reflecting the understanding that inadequate preparation could result in mission failure and loss of life. Young women officers occasionally sought her advice about pursuing careers in combat aviation, recognizing her as someone who had navigated barriers that remained formidable despite official policy changes. Her counsel was typically practical rather than inspirational, emphasis on technical competence, physical preparation, and mental toughness, rather than abstract discussions about breaking barriers or changing cultures. Success, she believed, came through demonstrating ability rather than demanding recognition. The weapons school's mission extended beyond individual training to include development of new tactics and procedures that would benefit the entire Air Force. Thorne's combat experience provided valuable input for revising close air support doctrines, particularly regarding operations in mountainous terrain where traditional tactics might prove inadequate. Her recommendations influenced training programs and operational procedures throughout the tactical aviation community. International students at the school brought perspectives from allied air forces, creating opportunities for tactical exchange that strengthened multinational cooperation in military operations. Her reputation had spread beyond American military circles, making her a respected figure among Allied aviators who faced similar challenges in their own services. The bonds formed during advanced training often lasted throughout entire careers, creating networks of professional relationships that transcended national boundaries. 2 years after her rescue mission, the strategic situation in Afghanistan continued evolving as American forces prepared for eventual withdrawal from the longest conflict in the nation's history. The Taliban remained active despite tactical setbacks, adapting their methods to counter American technological advantages while maintaining pressure on Afghan government forces. Combat operations continued, but with decreasing intensity as political objectives shifted toward transition rather than decisive victory. Her students at Nellis would likely face different challenges than those she had encountered during her deployment, requiring tactical flexibility and adaptive thinking that went beyond mastering established procedures. The nature of warfare itself was evolving, incorporating new technologies and strategic concepts that demand